Yeah, we're live. So here we go, guys. It's back with GMIHub Studio Talk.
Nice.
It's been a great summer. We've been off for most of the summer, so it's great to see you. Tonight, we're talking about monitor and in-ear monitors and monitor engineers. So we'll get into that. But before Cheryl's going to introduce everybody, I've had an interesting
return services.
I've had an interesting time just going through the summer, doing lots of audio and doing monitors from the front of house. So I'm here to learn how to do monitors from front of house for in-ears and for wedges and probably side stage, as we have a lot or a few number, I guess 3 people who are really, really good at monitor engineering. I will let Cheryl introduce this from here on out.
Hey, everyone. So glad that you're here to join us. And we are so glad to have with us 3 fabulous panelists with us. 2 of them you've seen before. We have Darrell Smith from I have to say that right, KungPow Productions, AV consultant, engineer, extraordinaire, consults for a lot of churches. So great to have you back, Darrell.
And he's delighted to be here.
Awesome. We have Christian Stonehouse all the way from Alberta, from House of Stone. He is the audio engineer. He's a producer. Again, audio like extraordinaire. Welcome, Christian. So glad to have you back.
Hi. Nice to see you guys. Great to be back.
Yes, and all the way from, is it California?
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. California. We have KT Aguilar. She is the all things monitor engineer for Bethel Church out in California. And she's also just came back from tour with, I'll let you tell you, you got to say the names.
It was Chris Tomlin, and then I was with Bethel Music, and then Carrie Job and Cody Carnes.
Awesome. So welcome back from your tour and welcome to
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, it's over to you.
We're talking about monitor engineer and monitors. So much to go on. I keep hearing guys who have the in-ears. I think we'll jump. Actually, I'm going to do this. When should churches start looking at putting monitor or in-ear monitors for their musicians on stage? I'll start off that way. And what size of auditorium, number of people in it?
Hopefully what unfolds in this hour, especially as you guys hear from KT, who's out doing monitors for some of the top artists in Christendom, is that there are a lot of pieces that come into play to do in-ears well. And KT and Christian and I have all met dozens, hundreds perhaps of musicians over the years who've had experiences that were kind of crappy with in-ears for one reason or another. And when you got the right console and the right amount of time and all the right inputs, and you've got somebody with expertise like KT in your corner, in-ears can be amazing. And they could be such a wonderful, comfortable way to be on stage with a live drummer, not getting crushed with volume, to really feel connected to your instrument and other musicians. That said, if you're, in a situation where there hasn't been adequate energy and effort put towards building a high quality in-ear system, the experience can be terrible. And often a lot of people think it must be me. I must be just a crappy artist or inexperienced or whatever. Like, in-ears are a magical solution that make everything better, but it's not the case. In-ears are isolating. And so if the world you're isolated to is garbage, then your experience is going to be pretty terrible too. So that's a big thing for churches. Until you're ready to make a commitment of equipment and like miking everything and making sure that every artist who comes on your stage has at least a decent set of universal fit monitors, it's better to just rough it out with wedges and stay old school.
Yeah, I would fully agree. If you can't mic everything on stage, like, that is so hard when you're putting like two plastic things in your ears and isolating yourself from the stage that you can't hear what's going on the stage. Where with wedges, you have that live aspect, where, you know, if the bottom snare mic isn't mic'd, like you can still hear it because it's behind you or whatever. And I mean, for us at Bethel, we also like we're so in tune with like bleed. So like with our in-ears, we also have a drum shield because we don't want the bleed to go into the mics. So like every single piece of our drumming has to be mic'd. So yeah, I mean, if you definitely don't have the capability yet to buy the things that you need, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be all wireless. You could do, like at our church, we have a lot of our rooms in our secondary campus that's an X32 with P16s, or a Digico with Avions, or whatever is going to suit you best. It doesn't always have to be the best thing yet. Like you can gradually get there as your team gets used to like, oh, we're switching from wedges to in-ears, which is going to be a huge change anyways. So it's like you can also do it gradually, but kind of like everyone has to be on board with it or it's not going to work.
So should you start with, I'll call it the back line, where you start off with the drummer and the keyboard player and the bass player, because they're hard line. That's usually a fairly simple way to go. Should the guys who are up front leading, the singers, your acoustic guitar, if they're up front, should they be on the P16s where they're on a leash stuck in, or should that be wireless, or should they create some?
We do it. We have at our secondary campus, everyone is on a P16, or when we have our BSSM school during the week, they're all on Avions and they're all chained to the Avion. Mind you, we buy long enough cables so that way they're not like stepping on them and whatever. For instance, Jen Johnson, she has her own personal mixer where she's tethered to it because she would prefer to mix her own thing. So I don't think that being tethered to something is an issue if you have that conversation first. Like I do know of a church who has an X32 with P16s. All of their P16s are at front of house, which that's another maybe conversation that we can get into. And then it feeds into a wireless system where they are wireless on stage, but they still are using personal mixers. I would probably tell them that they should have the mixers somewhere closer to stage instead of in front of house, but that's a whole other issue.
That's a common setup for us. KT, we tend to do a lot of Allen Heath products. So for our clients, we do the ME1, which is cool because it's 40 inputs instead of 16. So you can, you don't have to group a bunch of stuff, in front of house. But we'll do systems where the downstage singers and that have an ME1. For rehearsal, it's on stage with them. But then for the actual service, they put it side stage. And then that just connects to their wireless system, PSM 300, IEM G4, whatever. So they're wireless. But the great thing about that is a lot of churches don't have a dedicated monitor engineer. And so this sort of frees front of house up to focus on house sound. They can all take care of their own mix. Which
is a brilliant thing to do. And I think it's very helpful for when you are at a church that has a one sound engineer or it could even be a volunteer. Like, it helps with that buffer of this person doesn't have to step in and have the abundant knowledge of everything that they need to know when it comes to this. It makes it very, very simple. And having those like P16, Avions, ME1s, those things, very helpful. I think even Yamaha has is it Yamaha that has it's on like your iPad or something?
Yeah, bunch of them. Yeah, most of them.
So it's like, it's so helpful to have that as a resource when you are switching over from a wedge situation to more in-ears.
Okay, so then I'll ask this question. How do you go about teaching your musicians to what is good for their ears when they're still trying to, work through their songs on Sunday morning? Like, where's the teaching? How do they get taught that before they get up on stage so that they have a good mix?
Yeah. So we don't do it as much anymore. But we used to have where we would rehearse on Saturdays, and that's where I would come and help them with their mix. There's also, I talk about it a lot with like everyone, even the people that I mix for. I will say, hey, louder is not always better. So like, don't turn your pack up to 1,000,000, like all the way up. Louder is not better. If you can't hear something, you should probably turn something down first before you're going to turn something else up. And then like I have sat down with a group of our worship community with a P16, and I have gone through what you should do. I also go through in every position, I have a preset mix saved. So it's like, hey, this is a good starting place. If you need something, you can change it, but you can always recall this. So even if you're an engineer and you're a front of house engineer, you can still pull a really good in-ear mix using a P16 and sitting there and presetting it. So I have done that. I can go in, preset something, save it, and then each position has their own mix that they can recall.
So KT, what's different about those? Like, for instance, I delight myself in listening to people's in-ear mixes when they're on Aviom or ME1. And I'd say for most amateur singers in particular, right, it's probably 50-50 whether they have any band in there at all. Most of them have themselves and maybe a little bit of somebody else, right? And then if they run it loud and there's limiters, sometimes then their voice will mask everything once things really get going, even if they did have band in. So how do you, like, when you go and dial in your P16s for bass and say guitar and vocal, how are those mixes different? How are your starting places different?
Yeah, so one thing too, just to go back to, I try to build a really good relationship with the artist or anyone on stage when it comes to the P16s, because I want them to tell me if they're struggling and like, hey, I don't know how to mix this today and I don't know what I'm doing. So I try to build that relationship. So that way, if I'm sitting at front of house, doing front of house at our second location for the church, where we do have P16s for the band, they could be like, hey, KT, I'm having a really hard time. Can you come and help me with my mix? And I'll bring my ears and I'll listen to it and I'll mix it and try to help them. For setting up a vocal, the way that I mix, and this is if I'm mixing on a Digico or if I'm mixing a P16, it's always the same. I start with a very even band mix. And it's something that we can maybe kind of talk about too, is panning and stereo and all of those goodies that help. But I start with what I call like a front of house mix. So everything is very even, nothing's really poking out. You have your bass that's going to give you your whole notes that you can kind of refer to. And then I have the vocal barely sitting on top. Like, it's not going to be a huge separation between band and vocal. Because you can lose click, you can lose your pitch, you can and it starts to like, you again, going back to, you isolate yourself. So it's just you in your ears. One thing that was an amazing tool for me that I use now for vocals is when a vocal is losing pitch, I had Darlene Check come and tell me, be like, hey, you're in charge of my pitch. If I lose my pitch, I need you to turn up the bass. So I always make sure in a vocal mix that bass is not heavily present where it's like making the vocal a little bit muddy, but enough where it's like, okay, I can't find my pitch. Oh, there's the bass. And you can consciously think about it and find it. And then for any other mix, really, that's kind of my approach, is it's going to start with a very even so-called front of house mix, where nothing is poking out. And then whatever instrument is going to be the forward one, so electric guitar, whatever that looks like, that one is going to be slightly forward, but it's still sitting enough in the mix where it's not so far forward where you're like losing, because you're still playing as a band. Like you still need to have the feel of what the other musicians are doing. But that's how I approach any mix that I step into, is that.
Two quick things to add. I've been lucky enough to be able to listen into some, top tier world-class artists and listen to different people's mixes on stage. One of them that really was inspiring for me was this gal, Jessie Collins, who tours with Kelly Clarkson.
Amazing.
And Jessie is a world-class background vocalist, like on all sorts of records. Her mix for me was shocking in the most best way possible, and it's such a great story. She actually tucks herself under Kelly. She is not on top in any way. She's slightly under. And I was like, why would you do that? Like, you are, you're totally at risk. She's like, look, I am not worried about my pitch. My job is to blend the character of my vocal so it's indistinguishable from Kelly. And the way I do that is I'm just sitting just enough under that she's on top. And so when I'm invisible, when all you hear is the harmony, but you hear no distinction of voice, I'm doing my job. And that's why I'm indispensable for the artists I work with. And it's like,
that is beautiful.
Yes, thank you. Somebody who's slightly under. That's number one. Number two thing to throw out there, Christian, sorry, man. Do you have something you want to throw out on that one?
Nope.
Okay, good.
You go.
Number two, I had the honor of working with a manufacturer who spent $1 million researching what musicians need in monitor mix scenarios. And they were looking at both wedges and InEars, but the idea was they wanted to build an artificial intelligence, if it was possible, that would help musicians get a great mix without needing an engineer. And the product didn't succeed, and so I'm not going to make a big deal about that. But the research was phenomenal, and the research showed us a few things that are going to sound really obvious when I lay it out there, but to KT's point, are critical and are the reason why a number of musicians are not able to perform at their best despite being on InEars. One, you need a timing reference. If you're going to play with other people, we share time. And so whether it's the click or the drums, whatever you're going to use as a timing reference, that needs to be in your mix. Now, some people have the click so loud that it's like blowing their head out. I don't know if that's always needed, especially if you're not the drummer, but have a timing reference. Two, you need an arrangement reference. It's shocking how many people don't know where they are in the arrangement because they can't hear other harmonic instruments, pianos, keys, whatever. They're just lost at sea. Or bass. Bass player is most likely to know where anyone is in the arrangement. It's like bass players have the gift of responsibility. And so they're good people to follow, right? So that's number two. You got timing reference, arrangement reference. Number three is a pitch reference. If you're a vocalist, you can't hear the bass or a keyboard or a guitar, something to sing in tune, you're going to be in trouble. You might think you sound like $1 million in your InEars, but you're going to be like putting out a foul sound if you don't have a great pitch reference, right? And so when it comes to how to situate yourself in a mix so that you've got all of those things, and like KT said, I totally agree. We always start with the baseline mix. I think of it as a broadcast mix because like InEars give me an opportunity to provide the artist with more of a studio experience, and then we'll feather in ambience mics and really help to make that feel live. But I think we have the opportunity to give people a pretty tight, pretty concise mix and then help them sit on top of it. And then I'd love to hear KT and Christian too, because Christian's been wonderfully working so far to talk about panning, because panning is such a critical tool when running InEars. And all I want to say about panning is anyone who tells you that InEars work great in mono needs to be blessed in another area of ministry, preferably janitorial.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yes. So God gave you 2 ears, and KT's going to tell you why that's a good thing. Christian can tell you too. But KT, talk to us about some panning strategies that help people distinguish their performance from others on stage?
Absolutely. Like you said, you have two sets of ears. So keys, left, right. Even we have guitars. We have 4 guitars. Each guitar has 2 amps. It's a left right situation, and they're panned so that way you actually can hear them. If the guitar's on your left, you're going to hear it on your left. If the guitar's on your right, you're going to hear it slightly on your right. It creates space. That's what you're doing. With the click, a little secret I can share is that I don't have the click right down the middle. I have it panned ever so slightly because, especially for vocalists, it actually clears the way for their vocal to sit in the middle. And also it gives you stage awareness, I think. If you're a vocalist and you're in the middle and you have 2 vocals either on the left or right, it kind of gives you your awareness of the stage back. So it's like, oh, somebody's singing to the left of me. Oh, I actually can hear that as though they are there. And it's, for me, it sounds the most natural because we have 2 ears for going in stereo, but also it creates space because when you're in mono, everything is in the center and it's all muddy and it's all right here in the front of your face. Where with stereo, the best that you can do with as much stereo as you can, whether it's overhead mics for drums, whether it's having 2 guitars so they can be stereo, whether it's having your keys in stereo, it gives you that space back in your brain where it's like, this is how it should be. And it sounds better.
Yeah.
Like
the science shows that you can have an instrument 6 dB quieter when things are panned out than you can when it's all mono, and be able to distinguish it in your brain. So think about that 6 dB, that's like 50 times quieter on a logarithmic scale and still be able to distinguish it. So that's a critical tool for InEars. Chris, come on, man, jump in. Get the water's warm here.
You're quiet today.
Well, no, I'm giving some amazing people their chance there. Lord knows I can talk. Wow. Man, anybody who knows me well knows words are nothing I really have a problem with.
Hey,
with getting my
KT just recommended 4 guitars in stereo. That sounds pretty crazy to a lot of people. Tell us about guitars in stereo.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know what you said. I'm pressing it. Yeah.
I think I got to make a distinction here because this is the one thing that I would kind of I'm seeing it from a bird's eye view a little differently than you guys, just slightly, and that is that if you're talking to churches that are under 500 people and that mostly a lot of the stage musicians don't ever move around, it's almost like we have 2 different scenarios in place because. Number one, you've got a lot of musicians who think that they should be wireless, that never move 1 foot from where they've stood the whole time they're leading worship. Yes. So immediately I'm going to say, actually, you should be tethered because no one's going to see it. Just get an extra 6 foot, 3.5 mil extension, and no one will see that running up your pant leg or wherever in the heck you want to run it. You should just be tethered because it's just one thing less that we have to deal with wireless wise. And then the other thing that's very fascinating is, so this concept of broadcast mix are getting general levels. That is really excellent. I love it. Now, the only thing that I think is important to take note of is many times in smaller groups, church groups, where there's a lot of amateur musicians, you have people that aren't necessarily super well gifted at the position that they're actually fronting. So you might have a guest person, whatever, playing violin who cannot intonate for the life of them. So the idea of having that balanced in the mix to me is kind of ludicrous because that would be the first thing as a musician and singer I would pull out. I'd be like, that violinist cannot intonate and I cannot pitch with that person playing in my ears, so gone. So in an amateur scenario, I have to say that your mix balances for monitors is a little bit different in churches that are, and it's the same with vocals and stuff. There's people who've been singing for 30, 40 years that are I see all the time on their teams, and they're always under. they're always a little bit flat. They're always a little bit sharp. And it doesn't matter if they were the same when they were on wedges. Going back
Totally
20
agree.
years, they sang the exact same way.
No
So
shame in cutting certain people out of your
Oh,
mixes.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think KT would agree, even when you're on a big tour, if we can wire artists over wireless,
Yep.
make it so, because nobody
Mhm.
wants to spend their afternoon chasing RF interference unless it's necessary, you know?
Yeah. And we do that with a lot of our artists. Our artists who are on an acoustic guitar, who are literally don't go anywhere, wired mic, and they are wired to their acoustic.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah, man.
ain't going to be jumping around the stage everywhere, and we don't want to have to deal with that.
100%.
Yeah, good call. The fact
So
that you make a
eliminate-
distinction is good.
Yeah.
You know, so the church that I'm mixing at right now, it's like they were all Sennheiser IEM 300 with a monitor engineer for like 10 years. Okay.
So sorry about that. Sounds terrible.
That
The noise
changed.
floor on those things, you got about like 40 dB of,
Yeah. So no, what I'm getting at is that changed about 3 years ago. And they went from everyone being completely wireless, and it worked well with a monitor engineer, to now everybody, get this, everybody is on an ME1. Nobody is wireless right now. And this is the biggest church in Western Canada. Nobody is wireless right now. Literally, the transition has gone, unless someone asks for it, then we'll put it in. But everyone's got an ME1 in front of them, the iPad holder, because they've realized nobody's jumping around. Now that may be different, like if we have a special worship night and it's a little more youthful or whatever, but I found it fascinating that they've essentially gone back in time. Like
it's not back in time, it's present, because with all the changes in RF, DTV stations, it's changing monthly. Like you have no idea what you're walking into. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I know you're at a pretty conservative church, Christian, so you know, jumping around really isn't a thing. But even in churches where people are jumping around a little bit, the cable extension is totally workable. You know, it doesn't have to limit movement or flow in the spirit or whatever, if it's done well.
Yep. Good call.
All right, back to you, Darrell. We went a whole lap around the park there. Without you, buddy.
I'm taking notes.
We're leaving one question. You got one question left, Darrell, in the next half an hour. And we're just going to run with it.
Okay, here's the question.
Yeah.
This will probably take us a half hour. What type of in-ears should be the ones that go in the ears?
Okay, I want to rephrase that. What types of in-ears should not go in your ears? because
that's a shorter question.
That's a shorter question. So I will say that, look, everyone is in a different situation with what they can afford. And not everybody can run out and get molds made, you know, their own molded ears. That's fine. I ran on universal fits for 10 years. I finally got molds. I feel like a rock star, but honestly, I think my universal fit sounded better in practice. It's just like when the foam gets all skanky, it's kind of gross, you know? So like there's some hygiene things that maybe a 25-year-old male didn't think were that important, that in retrospect might have led to the odd infection, but that's a whole other conversation.
Oh, man.
Sorry, no, there was no infections. It just sounded funny in my head, and then it was disgusting when it came out of my mouth. But you know what I mean? So no shame in universal fits. I will say this. After spending a lot of time with a one-way universal monitor, a certain Shure product called the SC215, I no longer recommend one-way universals to anyone.
Three-way,
or two-way. I think as long as you get into the SC425, West-Tone's got great products, Universal, like everybody's got a great two-way now. But you're in $250 US, so that's like what, 400 Canadian? No, I don't know, like 325 Canadian. Two-way, universal fit, minimum requirement. Honestly, if you as a church are going to mandate going to IEMs, I recommend that you have 3 or 4 loanable sets with a huge array of foamies so that it's, you know, hygienic. Everybody has their own foamies. I've got one client who bought a a fishing tackle box. And when you play there, you get a set of foamies. They go into your little bucket and it's labeled for you. And next time you're there, you can pull out your foamies. You know, it's quite brilliant. But yeah, 2 ways for everyone. iPhone headsets have a different connector than normal headphones. They have a third ring. Yeah. And so you got to kind of like half cock it into the connector to get it to work at all. Right. And so that's a disaster waiting to happen. They have no headroom. There's like sound bleeding in everywhere. Total disaster. Don't do it. However sad, terrible your story is, I didn't even have gas to get here. Just don't do it, you know? Right. And churches, please have a number of sets of universal fits available to loan. It's just gets it done for folks. So that's my perspective. Yeah. No earbuds, nothing that came with your phone or your cassette player. 2 ways are better. And I would say you don't have to do custom molds. If you're not a professional, don't worry about it. If you are a professional, at some point the tour will probably go out and buy you a set anyways. So you might not even have to, pony it yourself. That's my perspective. KT, Christian, jump in.
Yeah, if cost is an option, if cost is really prohibitive, even Monoprice has got some great 3 and 5 way driver IEMs sub $100 that crush. They're really good for what they are. I can't remember the model names, but you can find them on the IEMs from Monoprice are actually pretty good. So just throwing it out there. So that whole idea of, it's just a matter of, like you said, though, people need to be able to take their foam tips on and off, and because otherwise you've got a scenario where churches just don't want to spend $100 and then have them walk. Because this is the other thing that happens. I've had it happen to churches I've worked at. IEMs walk, and it's usually after a guest performance, a concert comes in, and not with our regular musicians. It's somebody comes in on a Sunday night, runs a concert, and then sure enough, next Saturday we're missing two sets of IEMs, right? So, it's unfortunate, and I understand churches hardly have money for a friggin' $12 power bar that sits on the floor, right?
Power strip.
Yeah. It's like a surge protector. It's like $15 and man, you got to hunt all over the church. You're in the children's department. You're everywhere looking for it.
It's never happened.
Maybe not in your world. You're next. He's the next echelon then. Okay.
I bring a whole bin of my own power strips to every show.
Well, this isn't a show. This is like a church that anyways. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
KT, it's your turn.
Yeah, I would say we tell our students that do come for school, because they are doing school. We do say start out with 215s, and if you can go higher, do that if this is going to be a thing that you want to continue to do when you go back to church. Try not to sit in having 215s. But yeah, the Apple headphones, I got these off of the plane. Guys, I have seen that. It's so, I'm like, oh no. Or I had one person so sweet be like, yeah, so can I use my AirPod Pros or because of and I'm like, nope, no wire, doesn't work. But having something even getting all clears, they're great. If you do want molds that aren't crazy expensive, all clears are a great path to go to. I use 64 Audio. They're great. I love them just because they have a little module that actually brings ambience back into your ears, so you're not fully sealed, which is that your natural ear is getting to hear things.
The binaural mic thing. Yeah.
So, but for churches who obviously can't do that, Sure's products. I have a pair of SE 215s. I have a pair of 425s with me always because you never know what's going to happen or who's going to break what, or they're just such a good, reliable thing. And I've had some of our artists be like, my molds are broke. Can I use your 425s? And then they've just stuck with them because they like them better. It blows my mind. And it gives you that a little bit of the stage noise that you kind of want back in your ear anyways, and they like it better, and they'll keep their ears in the whole time, and I'm happy about that. So I can't complain.
There's a lot about custom molds. Like, okay, so I got trained by who is it? Ultimate Ears to actually do 3D scans and help artists get sorted out. I learned a ton of things in the process. Number one, your ear holes, your ear canals grow your entire life. So you get molds when you're 20, by the time you're 30, you kind of need new molds because your ear canals are bigger. The seal, how well that InEar seals out sound is everything. It has a massive impact on sound, what you're hearing, right? Huge impact on bass, mid-range, the whole thing. So having a great seal is super important. If your custom molds don't seal well, they don't like
send them back.
got to do it again. And over time they'll loosen up. Universal fits, all that kind of goes away because that foam expands to kind of make it happen. So I have, $1,700 high-end ears because I was acting as a sort of an audio engineer on a live record. So I wanted to be able to get in there and move a snare mic and be able to hear exactly how it affected, right? I wanted to be like, have that much isolation. So I convinced myself I needed expensive ears. They sound amazing. I love them. But yeah, like to KT's point, I go back to my 425s. I'm like, I don't think I'm missing anything. And these are a quarter the price, So, hey, can I ask Christian and KT to just give me your guys's minimum requirements? So let's say I'm a church, I'm thinking about transitioning to ears, or I've upgraded my console. Let's say I've like gone from a console, an analog console, to a digital desk. So now we're thinking about ears. What are the minimum requirements you would suggest to us to get to a level of success? And I'm thinking like, do I really need to mic everything? Do I need to provide universals for people? Ambient mics, like, is everything pre-fader, can I go?
That's a great question.
Pre-EQ, pre-compression, or do I need, channels that are dialed in? Like, what are the minimum requirements for people to have a successful experience with InEars? Go.
That's a very interesting. I'm just really quickly, I'm going to let KT take this, but I have an interesting perspective on the whole pre and post thing. It's fascinating because as technicians, we always want to give the artists basically post your preamp gain send of all the channels. And what I'm going to propose to you guys is that the times that I've not done that, the times that I've actually done it post compressor, post EQ, when I've got my audio processing in the room flat and dialed, the artists complain so much less when I send it post compressor and EQ from
who's
the
doing
desk.
it pre anymore? That's ridiculous. That was a complete trick question. I haven't done pre-send since the Mackie 1604.
They're doing
That's
presends
probably before
right.
KT was even
No,
born.
we're doing presends right now because the ME ones let you do a little bit of, you can add a bit of like.
So scary.
Oh no.
Well,
like what is life without a high pass filter in audio? Like if you don't have, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to go take a walk around the block. I'm upset now.
No, but there's honestly I don't know what you guys have discovered. Most of the people that I'm with, they're always, because here's the thing is sometimes front of house or monitor, they're jacking up stuff like crazy. They're adding 15 dB to the snare drum. So if you're sending that through, which I mean, I've run tons of front of house guys that'll add 15 dB at 12K of the snare drum, not just one or two, like lots. So if you've come across that and you're sending that through to monitors, now your snare drum's super crispy and it's like, holy moly. Can I just get a snare drum that just sounds like a little more flat, a little more normal? So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation, but KT, you take it because I sort of got
let's sidebar that.
there.
I think that's a great conversation.
That
Let's
is a
sidebar
great
it. Let's get minimum requirements and then let's come back to that.
Yep. Okay.
Minimum requirements. Go KT.
Yeah, I would say like I'm thinking of our second location where that's kind of where our new members of our worship community come and start. I would say when you're switching over to InEars, I would probably provide like 215s or something to start them off with. I would probably sit down with everyone and actually explain what to do with a mix. So that way they have some sort of basic knowledge. I would say like, hey, you know, we should, if you need help, tell me, I can come. And definitely post everything, post EQ, post compression, like, because I think that like what you were saying is that there is something to when you as a front of house engineer are mixing for the house, it's also going to sound good in the ears. Mind you, if you are boosting something 15 dB, that's where my monitor, when I am doing front of house and I have to do monitors through front of house, my monitor engineer brain comes in and I actually sacrifice and I kind of compromise and I go, what are the things that are going to hinder the ears and maybe do better for the PA, but I need to also cater to what's going on stage because they're the ones that are going to be giving me the sound that I need to do this anyway.
Sure.
Ambience mics, crowd mics, gots to have.
Essential.
Gots
Love
to have them. Again, you're throwing two plastic things in your ears, you're isolated, having crowd mics, and having them stereo left, right is going to put them back into the room. So anyone that I talk to who is at a smaller church and they don't have crowd mics, I highly recommend them to find a way to get crowd mics on stage somewhere.
What's your starting EQ compression for crowd mics? Where would you start?
I don't compress them.
Okay.
And I probably do a high pass filter almost up to 300. So I want them to be crispy. I want them to poke through the best that they can through the mix, because that's kind of what it's going to sound like when you're hearing them, because you're not going to hear that low end from the crowd. You're only going to hear the top end. So that's where I would start, is really getting rid of your low mids, and even some of your mid range, and really trying to get the top, so that way they poke through. But other than that, like making sure it's in stereo, don't do mono. You know, like I love what we do because we do have P16. So our drums has a stereo bus, our keys have a stereo bus, and our crowd mics is mixed with reverb in that stereo bus. So it just brings that live aspect back to your mixes. But that would probably be my baseline, are those things, because it makes your mix lively on top of having, you know, like putting them back in the room.
You time delay your microphones to the crowd mics?
I do not.
No need.
It gives it that sense.
No.
You're going to get, like, depending on where the crowd mics are, you're going to get that like 100 milliseconds of like pre-delay, as we call it, in you know, like, and you're used to, Darrell, you're used to pre-delay on your reverbs and stuff. So it's essentially that. I mean, it usually is pleasant if it's far enough. The worst kind is if it's like 10 milliseconds. If it's 10 or 20,
or it's like a slap back, or all you're getting in your crowd mics are the slap back from the PA, then you're going to be like, oh no.
Yeah, if it's under
Cheryl,
50, it starts getting cool at about 40 milliseconds, you guys. 45 is pretty much 55 is your Elvis slap, like that that tape slap. You can get away with that. Anything less than that, and it feels like a flam. It's like, and then it's like, oh, that's weird. I don't know if I like that.
But Darrell should get a geek badge for asking that question.
That's a great question.
On our behalf, make sure that he gets another little super geek badge.
Darrell, I've fed in ambient mics from like 200 feet away, and they sound fantastic. It's like this beautiful delayed reverb. It's killer.
Yeah, it's good.
And if you want to have a conversation about time aligning ambient mics, that's a great conversation for the broadcast mix.
Yes.
There's a lot to be said about doing that work there.
That's
but ear's not as important. Okay, let's just round back for a second about strategies for pre-post channel processing. I think we're all on the same page, KT, Christian, and I, that the best outcome for the artist is a post a pre-fader post EQ compression send per channel. And I do agree that there are times when front of house takes things to the extreme. A great example for me is one of the regular venues we mix in is a huge venue that isn't acoustically treated, so there's tons of mud. And so I just this Sunday I had an artist on the SC Electronics VR1, whatever their little red capsule is. I had to high pass them at 600 hertz to make it work in that room. That's ridiculous. 600.
Right.
Now, in his in-ears, it sounded terrible. He sounded like he was on an AM radio. So what I had to do was a studio trick called multing, where I took his one input and I brought it up on two channels. One I used for front of house to get exactly what I needed, and one I used to send back to him. So that's why I tend to think of it less as a front of house mix, because front of house is compensating for the characteristics of the room, right? We're EQing things, we're compressing things so that it works in this room. Broadcast and monitors is EQing and compressing things so it works great in a reference mix or in the isolation of in-ears. So sometimes multing, and the great thing with modern consoles, like any SQ console from Allen and Heath, is you generally have more channels than you need, and it's very easily to digitally route one signal to two places. So on key channels, it might make sense, like bass guitar is another great one, where you might want to compress it more in your front of house mix than the bass player wants in his in-ear. You know what I mean? So you can mult those, bring them up twice, have one for you and one for the artist on stage.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, I even do that in my regular mixes, my monitor mixes. I have two vocals. I have a vocal kind of like clean, and then I have a vocal dub that goes to the band, and everyone else that's a little bit brighter and more compressed and cuts through the mixes. So like doing that is so brilliant when you do have a console at front of house where you can do that with your monitor mixes. It's so brilliant.
That's great.
And then tell me about reverb. Like, what are there any tricks, KT, that you've picked up over time with bringing reverb in specifically for vocalists that help reverb work better?
I think, I mean, my reverbs tend to be a little bit on the warm side, just because it helps. It kind of like almost helps them with their tone. It gets away from like what they're hearing coming through the PA where it's brighter, and it kind of gives them back that low end and that pitch reference that they can find. And then I do add a slight delay to it, so that way when they hear it coming back through front of house as well, it actually matches up a little bit more. So, and I mean, reverb is the best for vocalists. They feel like rock stars when they're swimming in it. So it takes that like dry, dull isolation of an in-ear and kind of brings life back to their vocal a little bit, so that way it is inspiring, and it's what it's going to sound like at front of house with the reverb, so why not give it to them in their ears kind of situation. So totally
love it.
Yeah, I like how on the ME1s they've got the so we've got our like effects ambience coming in on its own, like 2 mix, but then when you hit group, you can go in and you can say, I want more ambient mic, more vocal reverb, and less band reverb. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so cool.
But they're obviously very expensive. They're way more than P16s, so it's like
look, it's so worth it if you can unleash your front of house guy to be focused on house sound and let your band do their thing. And I mean, I don't know. I'll tell you, as a performer, there's nothing more frustrating for me when I get a stereo mix of drums or keys, and now I got to negotiate with front of house and everybody else. Hey, I know you guys love tracks, but like I can't hear myself when they're cranking in the keys mix, you know, or drummer, like this guy is like all kick. So hey, front of house guy can, you know, forget about it. Just put it in an ME1. Everybody can deal with it on their own.
Right.
I will say this though, that is assuming that you have proper gain structure at front of house.
Yep.
Yeah, you like this gain structure topic. It's
I keep seeing it. We were talking about that beforehand.
That's good. No, it's true though.
Look, when it comes to gain structure, there's a couple things going on, and today, people are often in situations where we're gain sharing between different jobs, right? Where monitors, front of house, broadcast are all having to share the same input trims. And depending on who is driving those input trims really is going to have a broad impact on how those signals occur for everybody else. My point of view is that KT should be in charge of input trims, or whoever's filling KT's boots on that given day. And here's the reason why. She's on the deck with artists, and she's there with them line checking, and she can see that, oh, the kick drum mic got pushed out 6 inches. That's why I'm all of a sudden gaining up. I never had to before. She can walk out and find out there's pads on this DI that weren't supposed to be on. You know what I mean? Like, she can actually, whoever's on deck is much more in touch with what's going on. She's also closer to the artist, so she can tell if they're giving you their all in a sound check or not. Like, how many times have we sound checked an artist and everybody's playing timidly, and then
every time,
every time.
Yeah, it's like
the top, right?
Can you hit your ride cymbal, and it's like,
yeah, it's like ting 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 ting
ting.
Right.
Yeah, that's about what I'm gonna do. And then the guy's like,
they're just smashing.
smash ride, and I'm like, what the heck, man?
Yeah, so that's key, to have a great line check, make sure all your signals are good. There's all this lore that goes around the industry about, that the analog preamp's the only analog thing left in a digital system. And so, like, hit it hard, and whether you hit it hard or don't hit it hard, usually you've got digital trim on your console. So, and everybody's running 24-bit systems, which means you've got a lot of digital headroom before you're going to get into the noise floor. So Darrell, if you need to trim up on your console to compensate for the fact that, like, KT has never put hi-hat in anyone's mix, so she doesn't even bother gaming that channel. I'm joking, but I'm sure KT's been in that spot where front of house doesn't even try to turn it up because they just don't use it, So there's ways to get around it, but let whoever's on the deck collaborate during that sound check, that line check, make sure everything's dialed, and then broadcast is going to be happier. Front of house is going to be able to make it work with trims. Way to go. Or you get into a situation where you have analog splitters and everybody's got their own mic pre, and that's great, but it's kind of not needed that much anymore. Worked with Luke as too, and I've seen him. He tends to want his own mic pre's, and I totally get it. But he's generally working in a situation where there's a real budget. I've seen him use an SD7 as a table for his laptop, as I'm sure you have too.
Yes.
Yeah. So God bless him. I'm glad that's his world. It's not mine. Back to you, Darrell. Sorry, man. I just totally hijacked this whole thing.
But that's why I brought you guys. Like, I've actually been taking notes. I've been writing notes because it's so far. I normally don't touch monitors. So I'm taking notes. I'm having fun learning all this and catching up on this. But it is, wow, it's almost 8 o'clock, and I think I asked 3 questions, or was it 2? Cheryl hasn't said anything.
I just smiled and I was like, guilty as charged for all the artists. It's true. Like, I'll be honest, as an artist, I've only used InEar monitors, I think, once. And to be honest with you, I'm just as guilty as an artist to stick one in, have it out, because I wanted that live feel. And unfortunately, the people running sound and monitors at that time didn't capture that for me. So I'd have one which would have everything that I'm supposed to hear, and then I'd get the live feel on the outside so that I can, kind of balance the two. And I'm sure it drove them crazy, but they didn't say anything and they didn't know what to do, right? So this has been really good. So guilty as charged. And then the sound check thing, I was like, okay, guilty as charged. There are so many people, like singers too. Singers are guilty of this. You tell them to do a mic check. They play
right.
Whatever. they start to sing, and of course they're just kind of la da 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 dee dee dee. They're not doing what they would do. And I think
Right.
Darrell, who's been running sound this summer, he said, "Is that how you're really going to sing?"
Right.
To me, the way you're going to do it, and people, and
That's hard.
I know, because artists, this is, I don't know if this is for everybody, but I know when I first started singing, I was afraid to sing all the way out because I thought, well, then if I give my all now, what's going to happen later, right? How am I going to do this later? And so I didn't give my all, but then I was guilty of really giving my all during the live thing. And then I was told later that everything went red, like everything just, because everything had to gain right back down again. So
you're not uncommon as a performer. Interesting. You could take it into public speaking. It's the exact same way. So it's so fascinating. We keep our wireless on a lot of times after. I'm always checking. We've got tons of wireless. So I'm making sure everybody's on board before they come on. And I'm PFLing in my headphones. And it's fascinating. Like, if I could give you volume differences, it's like when they're on the stage, they're kind of talking like this, and great to see you this weekend. And we're so glad to. And then when they're talking backstage, it's like, all right, guys, it's so great. I love being here. And that's the difference. And you're clipping, you're going red. Your gain structure is out of control when they're backstage. And then they come on stage and you're like, whoa, I'm minus 30 here. Because it's a bit of a confidence thing. I think all of us as artists, musicians, speakers, all of that could learn to become more confident in the position we are when we're there. It's like, speak it out, say it, sing it, like, give it. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's not hold the mic. I mean, there's people that can hold a mic 3 feet away. Like Christina Aguilera's of the world, and can still have tons of level going to that microphone 4 feet away. Like, I've seen them work it, right? And it's unbelievable because you're going, how do you still get enough gain? And you can't even hear that her mic is 4 feet away from her, it's whatever it is, 3 feet away from her voice.
Once again, like in the church, we have so many people who are coming in and it's either their first experience with monitors of any kind or whatever. They're still getting used to the sound of their own voice because our perception of how we sound is very different to what goes on tape when we record and step up to a microphone. It's different than what comes out of the monitor. And then you're totally dependent on some 18-year-old kid at front of house who knows how to turn the knobs, as to whether you'll be able to hear yourself or not, and whether you're going to perform at your best. So all of those conditions are what Cheryl put you in that position that you described. It's completely natural. However, it is a common experience for all engineers, and it actually contributes to the divide between artists and sound guys, because the sound guys feel like every time,
every time
blows up, and because you guys, are so that is a key area that, and it comes down to time. So I think KT would tell you that. KT, tell us before you guys went on this run with that you just described, how did you spend much time in pre-production? Did you guys do a rehearsal?
We did.
You went out?
Yeah, absolutely. Rehearsals are so important. Another thing too, though, is that you kind of like anticipate that artists are going to do that. So when they're doing that, I always ask, like, hey, are you saving your voice for the thing? And they'll be like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, great. So I actually won't gain it up. I'll stick to what I know to be true for gain structure of like, okay, when an artist does this, I know that they're probably going to hit this, so I'm going to leave it here. And so the band will complain. They're like, hey, we can't hear them during the rehearsal. And I go, well, they're not singing full voice. And I'm like, I love you all, but I'm not going to compensate for that right now, because it's just I'm going to blow your ears out later. So, and I also, the band will say like, hey, to the artist, like, hey, could you actually sing out just for a little bit so we can get our ears ready? And I defer to them, because I in that moment, I would just rather wait instead of blowing everyone out when the show starts.
So do you rehearse for like an hour or 5 hours or 3 days, or like how much time with monitor mixes would you put in as a band to that tour?
Yeah, so when I'm with Bethel Music, I pretty much have my show dialed for them, and I also know everyone's mix because I tour with the same people the majority of the time. So we'll probably rehearse for about 2 hours, and dialing in their mix probably only takes about 45 seconds, or not, sorry, 45 minutes, 45 seconds. I wish that would be brilliant. But about like 45 minutes to really like for them to feel 100% comfortable. Depending on song to song, there's always going to be a little bit of difference between those, but about 45 minutes, and the rest of the time they're just free to not have to think about it anymore, and they're usually good to go.
Okay, so. And then run one more scenario for me. So the band, but like you've gone to Singapore and they have a console. It's like the Digigac, it's not a Digico. Your show file isn't compatible. You have to rebuild it. How much time now do you need to rebuild your show file? Do that first check with everybody. Is that like a day, hours? What do you think?
I could probably do it because I usually know what console I'm stepping into beforehand anyways. I could probably do it within like an hour or like hour 15. Just because I'm pretty quick about getting there, and I know what I'm going to get from the stage usually of how it's going to sound. So I could usually get there pretty quickly.
It's my point of asking all that. That's still 3 hours more than most churches put into it.
Yes,
totally.
Right.
Absolutely.
Most churches try and do a 45-minute rehearsal with a bunch of musicians that have never played together before and get all their InEar mixes together up against a hard stop because the service starts in 45 minutes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have to shake out the guy who brought like 8 channels of tracks that we've never used before in that time too.
Yeah.
So
rehearsal is very important.
Yeah. And U2, I was blown away. U2, how many times have they played Sunday Bloody Sunday? Probably a lot, right? Thousands.
A million times,
and they'll still rehearse it for 2 months before they do an international tour. Now, it's not all for them, but it's for the whole crew and the whole show to come together. But the point is, at church, we've created this kind of mindset where we want that outcome. We want to sound like Bethel, but we only have 10 minutes and like a stick of bubble gum and this like old popsicle stick that we found on the side of the road. And so if you guys could just try really hard, we would appreciate it so that we could sound like Bethel. You know? And it's like
another thing too that we do is on stage is that everything is pretty much stays the same every weekend. So we tune the drums as engineers. Our amps are all the same every weekend. Right. Our keys station is the same every weekend. So like we do things so that way when we do need to have a 45-minute rehearsal at 6:45 in the morning and we have a hard stop, we know what inputs are going, like they're gonna be the same.
It's
like nothing
down.
It's locked in. So I'm maybe changing gain about 3 dB maybe on each input depending on how hard the drummer hits or what sounds the keys player is doing, or how hard the electric player is hitting the amps or whatever.
Or the bass player shows up with his Noble DI and everything's
exactly.
Hotter.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very like small changes to mostly just gain structure and not even tone, because we sit down with almost all of our musicians and we work with them on their tone.
I love it.
So we do things to set ourselves up so that way when we do get into rehearsal, it's actually more efficient. And so that way I actually have time to pull a mix within the very short amount of time I have, but I know it's going to be fairly consistent. So we go for consistency.
That is huge. And Darrell, I'm sorry we went over your hour, but KT, I think that's actually the most useful, practical bit of information maybe we've thrown out there this whole time, that for churches that are in InEar land, anything you can do to lock down your house backline, house drum set, house snare,
yes,
house amps, is going to create enough consistency that you're actually set up to succeed on a weekly basis within the natural constraints that we have of that hour-long rehearsal before service. So
absolutely.
Yes, get all your wireless Kempers and whatever, put that down the list. Just whatever you got, try and dial it in. And we've talked about this before on your show, guys, like taking this great sound happens on stage. Great sound does not happen because you got some magical elf at front of house who knows some secret combination of knobs to turn. Great sound happens on stage, and that means your amps are dialed. You know, you've got some kind of shielding to keep bleed out of all your vocal microphones, so your drums and cymbals aren't just crushing everything. And you've got decent isolation on your instruments. That is the genesis of great sound. And then if you can lock that down so it's consistent, then now you're getting somewhere, and your artists are going to be a lot happier than they were when it's like, oh, this drummer is like the reggae guy, so he's going to play a piccolo, and this drummer's like the jazz dude, he's playing brushes this week because he always thought drums were too loud, and we just spend the whole time chasing the same stuff.
Well, case in point. So like, if you can get it, I think a lot of people don't know how to get it to sound good at the source. And I mean, it's funny, I kind of got called out on it last weekend. It was like, I didn't even know you really were doing sound because you weren't running stuff out of the PA for like the first X amount of hours. Because what the guy saw me sitting on the drum kit, tuning the bottom head of the floor tom and getting the cymbal. Like I had to have a tiny strip of gaff to the bottom of the ride cymbal so that the ride cymbal sat in the mix with the drum kit. When I listen to a drum kit, what I listen for is what's the loudest thing. And if it isn't the kick and the snare, then I'm usually going to address it, whether it be with felt, whether it be with, I've got all kinds of stuff. I work with leather. I work with all kinds of stuff that actually like will mellow out and tone down the volumes of different drums and cymbals. And so I will get them balanced. So I'll spend hours getting like, and then the amps on stage, if it's if a singer, if I'm pulling out like 8 dB at 160 hertz or 9 dB, and then more like another 6 at 400, and I know the room is flat, I'm going to just throw a different capsule on there. Cause I'm like, at this point, this is dumb. Like this capsule is not the right microphone capsule for the singer. Right. So I will spend so much time on the stage that people don't even know that I'm a sound guy. And, but here's the point. So the other, on the weekend, we lost that front house console. I had 2 cameras like this running around in front of the PA getting video. And I did not have an audio feed, a pure audio feed from the console. I didn't have time to set it up. I wasn't willing to throw the USB stick in the middle of the show and hit record. I was too scared I was going to crash something. Funny enough, those 2 built-in Nikon Z6 microphones in front of that PA and right in front of the stage, friggin' the sound is insane. It sounds so good. And I'm like, no, nothing was feeding it. It just, because the PA sounded good, the stage sounded good. It was like, boom, done. And I'm not saying like that's not how I want to record audio to video, is through the built-in microphones ever. But I was kind of relieved. And I was like, one of the band members even emailed me, was like, holy crap, it's like the video is awesome. Didn't even mention the audio. And I'm like, wow, this is just back to this point of spending time on stage, get it to sound right, get it to feel right for the performers and the musicians. If they love it, then like you said, KT, it's pointless if we don't make them feel it, and they've got to be putting it out. Yeah. And only then is it good, right?
Yep. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love. So good.
This has been interesting. I'm gonna throw out a question, and we're not gonna touch that today. And
that's for the next show.
That's gonna be for the next one.
So you're coming back all of you.
Okay.
All of
Yes,
you.
let's
So
go.
the next
Yeah.
one is the mental game of the monitor engineer.
Oh,
My
And then-
favorite topic.
And then what I'll do, and what we'll maybe do, and we'll have to work through this, and people are listening, is if we also bring somebody else who you've worked with another artist, so that we can hear the discussion of what you've had to do to help them and the mental game on that. So I can tell you some of the stuff I've done with Cheryl, and how we work, because it's a husband and wife, and I know how she sounds and what she likes and doesn't like from monitors. That's a funny discussion.
that's great.
Yeah.
But we'll do
Love
that. But yeah, so because I know that's a 3-hour discsion talking about the
for
mind,
sure.
playing with the mind.
Unless Darrell's running it, then it's 6 hours. Sorry, D. I'm just joking, D. He's probably gone already. He's like gone for dinner or something.
This is such a rich topic, and the truth is that it impacts every part of sound at church.
Yes.
So as far as I'm concerned, like we could totally spin our tires and waste time talking about what the cool plugins are to run it front of house. None of it matters until what's going on stage is sorted out. So
absolutely.
This is the most important conversation we could be having related to sound. Yeah, that's why.
I can only agree, because I think this is the one conversation that basically builds the bridge between what happens on stage and what's happening behind at the sound. So like, this has been absolutely awesome. So thank you so much for having this conversation. And I'm holding y'all to this. Y'all come
I'm here for it.
Okay.
I'm here for it.
Okay.
Even if you're on tour, we'll have to pull you aside.
That's right. We all got phones. We can find Zoom.
For those of you who have been watching, you have been watching GMIHub online. We have been having a great conversation about InEar and monitor myths. If you had any questions as to why sometimes using InEar works or doesn't work for you, you need to listen to this conversation over and over again here on YouTube. If you want to know more information about GMIHub, we are at gmihub.ca. We also have a lot of other conversations on our YouTube channel, which is GMIHub Online. Go ahead and check those out. For those of you who are on our mailing list, we have recently started offering something called a backstage pass. You would have got an email about that. So as soon as we go off air, if you've got a backstage pass, you are welcome to start activating that backstage pass, and we can continue this conversation offline. Also, let's see, I wanted to say that coming up in October, we're going to have our Christmas album coming out. You'll be looking out for some advertisements related to that. Congratulations to the artists that have their songs on there, and for those who submitted the artwork for the album. Thank you so much for doing that. You'll start to see a little bit more about that as time goes on. But I want to say thank you so much to Darrell Smith, to Christian Stonehouse, and to KT Aguilar for being here. Again, y'all coming back now. So
right on.
We will have this conversation on what
we'll have to figure this one out. There's so much. We've got so much good stuff, not just for the studio, but for up and coming. We have the former manager for Taylor Swift coming on.
Yes, Rick Barker is going to be on in November, but you're all going to come back.
Oh yeah.
And all you better come back and bring lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of friends online. Share this experience. But you know what? I don't want to take too much more of your time. We want to thank you. And remember that GMIHub encourages unity, community, mentorship, and talent growth. Y'all come back now here.